I've gone through my own experience over the last couple months where my liver enzymes, I eat clean. I eat all wild meat. I eat according to your plan. I eat the right carbs, whole food, prioritize the right proteins, and fill in. I don't tend to do well with high fats, so I tend to more be a higher carb person. But even doing all the right things, my liver enzymes were over 700. So would probably have put a doctor out. Like if I had gone to a medical doctor, they probably would have passed out and wanted me to get a liver transplant. I don't know what they would have done. Anyway, with that being said, my free T3 was in the tank and my testosterone was in the tank. But this is the other interesting factor. I had always in my life been anemic. And I had fixed it, but I've never been high in iron. My iron and ferritin was very high. And so I literally was rusting from the inside out. That was burdening the liver even more. So maybe and I don't know if you're seeing this more with our environment over the last couple of years, with livers just being totally backed up and overburdened, that the ferritin and iron is actually on the high end of people instead of the low end. And how that can affect the thyroid conversion and liver health in general.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to elevated ferritin, there can really be, I would say, two primary drivers. One is excess amounts of iron that we're putting into storage because there's so much iron, there's way more than we need. And this can lead to crazy high ferritin levels. I've seen them in the 700s, maybe 800s as well. And this is especially in people who are eating lots of red meat. Maybe they're on a carnivore diet and it's the only thing they eat. And that's a time where I tend to see very, very high levels of ferritin. It can happen even if someone's not on a carnivore diet as well. But these are situations basically of iron overload. And an iron overload, as you said, you basically have rusting from the inside out. Basically, that iron is extremely reactive and will amplify oxidative stress. And this definitely has a huge effect at the liver and is a major contributor to fatty liver disease and liver inflammation and the progression of fatty liver disease. And they have studies where they chelate iron in those situations and it helps to protect the liver. And it's not just there, it's everywhere. It'll happen in the brain, it'll happen in the vasculature. Excess iron is absolutely a major concern. But it's worth noting that you can have elevated ferritin and not have excess iron at all. You could even have low iron potentially if we're in a major inflammatory state. And one of the more common drivers there is a microbial or bacterial infection. And in a state like that, our bodies recognize we don't want to have a lot of excess iron because it is basically flammable. It's very, very prone to damage and can really make things worse. And it can also promote the growth of microbes and infections. So that's a case where even if there's not excess iron, the body will move that iron into storage and ferritin to try to keep it away from damage and from those microbes. And so there can also be cases where there's elevated ferritin, but there's not actually an iron overload issue. And instead, this is something that could be driven by an infection. And in that case, you're also going to have major liver issues in most cases, not necessarily because of the iron, but in this case, because of endotoxin. So endotoxin is one of the most toxic components of bacteria. The chemical name is lipopolysaccharide, and it's shortened to LPS. And LPS is one of the things that's primarily responsible for liver damage, liver dysfunction, fatty liver disease. It's highly associated with metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease as well. And if we have excessive amounts of bacteria, overgrowth of bacteria in the gut, producing a lot of endotoxin, this will cause inflammation in the gut. It'll cause intestinal permeability in the gut. And when we absorb that endotoxin, it'll go through the liver. That's where we detoxify it. But in the process, it creates a major inflammatory state there. And so this could be another scenario where we might see elevated ferritin and some major liver issues, although in this case, we're seeing it driven by this endotoxin problem, which when we're speaking of some of the more common drivers of issues, endotoxin is way high up there. Gut issues, bacterial issues are way high up there because, again, talking about the compromised state that so many of our bodies are in, that allows for infections to take hold. It allows for bacteria to overgrow when our stomach acid is low, our bile flow is poor, our motility is poor, our immune function is suboptimal. So this is a major, this can be a major driver of liver issues, of thyroid hormone conversion issues, of testosterone issues, of progesterone issues, estrogen dominance as well, can be driven by endotoxin.
So just as an example, then you throw on TRT to get your testosterone up, but you're not taking care of the endotoxins or the overload of bacteria or pathogens. And what I'm seeing is also a huge amount of candida and parasites in the body. And people don't know that they have all that in there because they're numb, because they don't know what it feels like not to have it in there. And when we talked about stress on the body, yes, there's the stress of your finances or your kids or your marriage, but what about the stress inside the body from the endotoxins that you have nothing to do to? You don't feel that. That's not something you're doing anything about, but your body is under stress, and so it's going to do what it has to do with all the things that we've been talking about in adjusting your hormones and prioritizing certain aspects of your health.